Welcome to Artistic Adventures. We're continuing our Vampire Slayer project today with part 3. We're going to be making her a crossbow. Well, I was going to make this video about making all the weapons, but unfortunately, making the crossbow took 2 days, people.
2 whole days, I'm telling you.
So, let's get started. I'm going to use this soft wood. It's not balsa. It didn't really say what it was. It came in a package with a bunch of different sizes. Could be pine, I'm not sure, but it's fairly soft, not too hard to cut. And I'm going to just draw the design that I want the front of my crossbow to be. Now, the crossbow that I'm making is going to be a working crossbow because, I mean, why make a crossbow and it doesn't work? We got to kill some vampires, right? So, I wanted it to fire an arrow, but I didn't want the strength of it to come from bending the wood in the front because with something this small, it just wasn't going to work. So I'm going to make one that uses an elastic band instead of having the wood bend to make the power of the bow. And I'm making a sort of curved front look. The arrow is going to come off the top, so I'm making an arch there so nothing would get in the way of the arrow as it's being shot off the front. And right now I'm measuring to try and make sure that I get this right, the same length on each side. And as you'll see later in the video, I didn't, but I was able to correct it. So anyway, it ended up looking sort of like a handlebar mustache, which was kind of funny, but this was just the design that I had in mind. So that's what it is. And we're just going to whittle this design out using an X-Acto knife. And please don't follow my example and cut towards you. Um, yeah, that's not really that safe. I was trying to be very careful and cut in very small, precise cuts, but I know you shouldn't cut towards your hand. I did use this little baby saw on some places where I had a long piece that I needed to saw and it was straight, but most of this was curved. So I ended up carving it most of the time. And I did do a lot of this off camera because this really took a lot of time to do. And I was just going to show you up close here, doing this sort of in chunks. You can cut down through several layers and then sort of pop it off with the tip and then go through some more layers. And that's how you get around those curved areas. You can't really just carve, in a curve like that because of the grain of the wood. It'll pop off and then you'll end up with a broken piece. So there's our semi-finished front, and then I'm going to do some sand work. And I use this fingernail sanding block, which works well because it conforms to the shape of the curves. And then I did go back in for a final layer with this 220 grit sandpaper, just regular sanding paper, and that got it pretty smooth down at the end. So now I'm going to take my little handy drill. I love this little Black& Decker drill. It's small. It'll screw in screwdrivers, and it comes with this little set of attachments that you can use for different projects around the house or with crafts, and it doesn't go very fast. So I'm just going to drill a hole into either end of this front of the bow, and this is going to be where we put the elastic string. So do that to both sides, and you make sure that you have a hole that's big enough for whatever elastic you're using to go through. Now I'm using the elastic that I have on hand for stringing BJDs, so it's a hefty size. It's not really small. You can get smaller than this if you wanted to say make a smaller crossbow for a Monster High doll or something. This one is for a 1/3 size doll, which is about 25 inches tall. And you've seen her in the other videos where I made her outfit. So I'm just putting it through there and dyeing a double knot to make sure that it doesn't come back through. I'm going to put some glue on it. Now I found these old buttons that I had on hand. They're dome shaped with a little bit of a decorative design, and I just used the pliers to break off the loop on the back that usually you use to sew it onto the material, and trimmed off that material. And then I sort of press it into the wood in the back because I didn't get it flush with the side, so I had to sort of pound that into the wood on the back. And then I did put some glue on the knot and then press that dome-shaped button down over it and hammered it in just for some good measure, just to make sure I got that pressed into the wood really good, so it'll glue down nice and tight. All right, so we got both sides done, and that's going to cover up our knot, and we have the elastic in the back that's going to pull back to shoot the arrow. Now this piece is going to be the piece, or it'll be the crossbar. So going to have to do a little bit of carving on this. I want the handle to be a little bit curved in the back at one point. So it might be a place where you would grip the bow. So I just sort of made some marks there, curved in on either side slightly. And I'm going to take my X-Acto again and just carve out those pieces. So I'm doing a little bit of this off camera so you don't have to watch me do the whole thing, but I think you get the gist of what I'm doing. And it does dull your knife, so I had to change the blade uh, during this process. So now you see I've got that carved out, sort of like a guitar head there on the end. And so on the corners, I want them rounded. So I'm just taking the X-Acto and chopping off the corners. And it's not completely round, but you can round it off when you sand it completely. All right, so I'm going to use my 220 sandpaper and sand this down. So that's going to be our crossbar handle. And we have our front. So now we have to attach it. Now I don't want to just glue that to it because that wouldn't be very strong. So now I'm going back and making sure that the distance between the two and marking it in the middle. And I realized that the middle is not where the arch peaks and the uh, bottom V comes up. It's off. So basically I just went back and sanded and cut that down a little bit. And then I got it to where the middle mark is right in the middle of the design. So even though you mess up, you can always go back and change it a little bit. All right, so there's going to be these two pieces on top. One piece is going to go into the wood. The other smaller piece will sit on top of it and will be the arrow guide, okay? And it will not be going into the front. So I just want to measure where I'm going to cut a hole into this wood to position that top piece. So say it's going to be a little offset. It'll be on top, but it won't be into the wood. But I still have to take that into account because I want the top of that to be just above the top of the front. So the arrow will come off easily. So I marked the top and the bottom of where that piece is. But now I'm going to cut it so that I'm using the width of this line as to how much I want to cut it because that's how much it will go into the front. So then I'm going to chop off just little squares on either side so that I'll have sort of a little indented piece to go into the front. So I'm just chopping out those little square shapes on either side. And then we have that small piece in the middle that's going to go into the front and we'll glue that in. And that's just going to give it a little bit more strength and stability than gluing it on. You could glue it on, just straightly glue it onto it if you wanted to, if you're not trying to make it a working one or don't really care about, how strong it is if you're not going to use it. But I have this thing about crossbows. I'm really obsessed with them. I had one time. I really loved it. They're very powerful. I used to watch William Tell movies when I was young. Really like these things. So I've made the outline of that smaller piece, and that is what I'm going to cut out. And to do that, you just cut around the edges of your outline and then use the tip of the X-Acto to dig out the wood that's between where you've cut the square shape. So there it is. I've cut that out and smoothed it out a little bit and got it deep enough to where this will fit in completely flush with the front. And then I'm just going to put some glue in there, some E6000, and glue that and let it dry. So it's looking good so far. We'll still have that top piece to put on there. So this is the top piece. I made a groove in the middle with using an X-Acto and then dragging a metal tool through that. And now I'm just sanding it to make it nice and smooth. And I put some E6000 on the back and also a little bit on the front where it's going to attach to the front. And I'm gluing that down on top of my crossbar. And you could always trim or clean up anything that you make a mistake. Now this piece I marked out is going to be the lever that holds the elastic string and allows you to release it and fire the crossbow. And so I just made a sort of a rough outline of how I think it's going to work. And keep in mind, this is artistic adventures. I've never done this before. So you're learning while I'm learning. Anyway, you can always usually fix things if you make a mistake, but that's the fun part for me. I mean, I kind of know how it looks and how it goes together and all the parts, but making it actually work, that's going to be the secret, right? So making a little curved hook on the end of this, and you have to be careful because this wood is so soft that you don't pop off the tip of the curve while you're carving. So just kind of hold on to it while you're carving. And so that's the basics. Then I trimmed off one end a little bit and sanded it so that it's nice and smooth. And so I'll show you how this is going to work. The wide piece there is the crossbow, uh, the bolt, and then that piece that I've got across there is just a piece I'm going to use to make a little block out of. I'm just trying to get the height right. So you see how the elastic's going to fit in there, and then when you raise that hook up, the elastic will come out and fire the bow. So I'm just cutting off a little block of that smaller piece of the wood and um, putting some rounded edges on it. And so let's try that again. So we have the crossbar with the piece on top that has the arrow guide and then an arrow, or this is how it will look eventually. So there's the way it would look with the arrow coming to the end of the guide. Then you've got a little block, and then you've got this piece. Whoop, I've got it turned over. Oh yeah. Okay, so you've got this piece, so you put this down on top of the block, and then it'll be attached with a wire, and then you just lever it up, and then it will release the elastic and shoot the arrow out. That's the theory. That's the theory. We're going to try this at the end of the video and see if it works. So I'm just going to paint those a bronze metallic color because they might be made out of bronze or some sort of metal if it were a real crossbow. And the crossbow would probably be wood. And of course the arrow has to be wood because, wooden stakes kill the vampire, but it's gonna have a silver tip. Now these feathers, I'm gonna use to put the feathers on the arrow. And what I'm doing is just putting some E6000 down along the ridge of the rib of the feather because we're gonna cut them and I don't want all the feather pieces to come out. All right, so I'm doing that to both of these on both sides, and then we'll let those dry, and then we can cut them and attach them to the arrow. So that part, we just have to let those dry a little bit. Now this arrow I made, and it really was too heavy on the top. I made two metal pieces and glued them on the end of the arrow, and it was just too heavy. So I'm going to do this a different way. I'm going to cut a ridge into this tip of this little dowel that I bought and cut, and then sew a ridge a little bit deeper in with my saw. And then I cut a little bit smaller arrowhead, a little bit less ambitious arrowhead. And I'm just sliding it into that slit in the wood. And once I get it in there, then I'm going to apply some glue front, back, top sides just to make sure it stays in there. And I think that's a little bit more realistic arrow. I mean, we just need the wood to get into the vampire to kill him, right? The silver might work on a werewolf, and I mean, she could run into a werewolf, so, silver's good too. All right, so that's how it's going to look and how it's going to fit on to the crossbow. So now that our feathers are dry, we can cut down either side of that rib and get our feather parts that we're going to glue to the back of the arrow. Try to make it look a little bit more realistic. We're going to do 3 spaced out around on the shaft. And I'm just using E6000 on this too, just because it dries really fast and it's pretty tough glue, so you don't have to worry about those coming off once we have them on there. They're a little bit raggedy, but you know, she's been fighting vampires for a while, so probably they got tore up a little bit, right? Okay, so we're gonna let the feathers dry, and then while we're waiting on that, we'll go ahead and paint the crossbow. We're gonna paint it black to contrast with the brass that we have for the fittings and the decorations. I've got another bigger one of those buttons I'm going to put on the front, but I wanted to go ahead and paint it first. I actually should have probably painted it before I put those 2 on, but I was able to paint around them, so that's okay. Everything worked out okay. Once you do one of these, you kind of see the steps maybe that you should have done in a different order, but nothing was so bad here that it couldn't be worked around or fixed. So we've got that glued down so that the bar is pretty steady now. I think it's going to work. I think it's going to work. We'll try it. We're going to try to shoot an arrow, our little baby arrow. So I'm just putting a coat of this on there. If you wanted to, you could even put a coat of gloss over this if you wanted it to be shiny. Or you could use wood stain if you wanted it to be the color of like a darker wood. That would be pretty too, but I'm all into the black with this character, so I kind of feel like this works. Like, I want to think that she got this crossbow like from her grandfather, passed down to her father, who were all vampire slayers or something. All right, and we're going to take our little lever and drill a little small hole in here that we're going to put a wire through. So we got our hole in there, and that's going to be what holds it onto the crossbar of the bow so that you can press it up and down to control the elastic band. Now I'm just bending it down on the sides, and this is going to go on either side of the handle of the crossbow. So once I get that bent down, you can see how that looks. And now I'm just going to try fitting things together here to see how it works. I've got the wires pulled up now. They will be going down when they're actually working, but I just want to see how this all fits together and if it's going to work. So you see, there's our little mechanism. Seems like it's going to work. All right, now that the feathers have dried, we can trim these off so they're a little bit straighter on the tops, and also they don't go too far out. And it looks pretty cool. It looks pretty much like an arrow. I like the red too. Sort of like blood. All right, so there's my mechanism with the wires down on either side of the handle. And now what I'm doing is I'm taking pliers and I'm bending the wires over, and then I sort of bend them into a round shape because I want to glue them down to the bottom of this. And the round shape will hold the glue really well. And that's going to make it a little bit more secure when we're going to be, you know, putting the strain of the elastic against that lever. So I want this to be a little bit stronger than just having it go down the sides. All right, so I've got that bent under there and two two ends curled around, and I glued it. And now I'm going to glue that bar under there. I want to get it positioned right. And while that's drying, I'm going to work on the front where I have that bigger button. So what I do is take 2 pliers, one to hold it down and one to pull off that loop on the back. And then I'm pressing that into that soft wood to make a mark. And that shows me where to carve out a little slot here for the back to go into. And then we'll glue that down. Unfortunately, I couldn't get it flush with it, so I have to have a little indentation there. All right, so we've got our slot, put some glue in it, and then I'm just pressing that in there really well. And there's our crossbow with the little mechanism in the back. I think it turned out pretty cool. Looks pretty deadly. And there it is with the arrow. So when not in use, you could just have the elastic hold the arrow down. And then when you want to shoot it, you have to pull the elastic back and hook it into the mechanism. So what do you think? Let's give this a try. You think we should try to shoot it? I'm a little scared. All right, let's do it. We're going to pull the elastic back, hook it into the hook, put our arrow on there, and then make sure that you have the feathers kind of underneath the elastic at the back, and that helps hold it down in the slot. All right, and now we're going to press that lever down in the back, and pow, it worked. All right, I have a working crossbow for our dragon slayer, our vampire slayer. Whew, that was such a long project. I hoped to have it done yesterday, but it took so long. Anyway, we got more weapons to make and a more costume, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Thanks, and bye.